The great stargate opened with a flash of blue light that lit up the darkness of Space Commander Park Han-woo stood on the bridge of the small Earthship watching as alien vessels surrounded them from all sides. These ships were huge and covered in strange symbols that glowed like fire. The aliens inside them had been ruling the galaxy for 3,000 years, and they were not happy to see newcomers. The Federation controlled everything in 47 star systems. Every planet knew exactly what they were supposed to do and which alien species they had to obey. The Veltari, with their silver skin and 4 arms, handled all the money and trade. The Maclon looked like giant bears with metal claws, and they ran the military forces. The ancient Corvex were the bosses of everything, with their crystal bodies that changed colors when they were angry or pleased. When the first human ship came through the Stargate, the aliens started laughing. The Corvex council members looked at these strange pink creatures walking on just 2 legs and decided they were probably the weakest species they had ever seen. Humans had no claws like the Maclon, no extra arms like the Veltari, and their technology was thousands of years behind everyone else. Grand Elder Mortash of the Corvex Council spoke to Commander Park through the communication system. His voice sounded like breaking glass mixed with thunder. "You will work in the places where other species cannot or will not go," he said. "Your people will mine the dangerous asteroids, clean the waste facilities, and fix broken machines in deep space. If you do this work well, we will allow you to live in our galaxy." Commander Park looked around his bridge at his crew. They had traveled so far from their small blue planet, hoping to find friends among the stars. Instead, they found masters who saw them as nothing more than cheap labor. But Park nodded his head. "Yes, sir," he said. "We will do whatever work you give us." The aliens sent humans to the worst jobs in the galaxy. Engineer Kim So-min found herself working alone in the engine rooms of massive space stations where one mistake could kill her instantly. The radiation levels were so high that most alien species could only work there for a few minutes, but humans seemed to handle it better than expected. Kim would sing old Earth songs while she worked, her voice echoing through the empty metal corridors. The songs made the other workers curious. A young Veltari maintenance worker named Vex Moore started staying late just to hear Kim sing. He had never heard music like this before. The Veltari had mathematical harmonies that were precise and perfect, but Kim's songs had something different. They had emotion and warmth that made even the coldest engine room feel like home. Miner Lee Junho was sent to work in the asteroid belt, where the rocks were full of dangerous gases that could explode without warning. The job was so risky that the Federation usually sent criminals there as punishment, but Lee did something that amazed everyone. He shared his food with the other miners even when he barely had enough for himself. The alien workers had never seen anything like this before. In Federation culture, you took care of yourself first and only helped others if it benefited you somehow, but Lee would give his lunch to a hungry Macklin worker or help a tired Veltari finish their quota. He never asked for anything in return. He just smiled and said that friends should help each other. Dr. Choi Min-young was assigned to the medical waste facilities, where she was supposed to dispose of contaminated materials from alien hospitals. But when she saw how many sick aliens were being turned away from expensive Federation medical centers, she started treating them for free. Her human medical knowledge worked better than anything the Federation doctors had. Word spread quickly through the alien communities about the human doctor who would heal anyone regardless of whether they could pay. A Macklin warrior brought his sick child to Dr. Choi after Federation doctors said the treatment would cost more money than his family had. She worked for 3 days straight, using human techniques mixed with what she could learn about Macklin biology. The child lived, and the grateful father told every Macklin he knew about the miracle human healer. What the Federation leaders did not understand was that humans were quietly changing everything. Each human who left Earth carried something special inside them, the ability to see others not as enemies or competitors, but as potential friends. They did not see a scary Macklin warrior. They saw someone who might be lonely. They did not see a cold, calculating Veltari merchant. They saw someone who might appreciate a kind word. Captain Yang Tae-young worked as an accountant in the Veltari banking district. Every morning he would bring fresh coffee from Earth and share it with his alien coworkers. The Veltari had never tasted anything like coffee before, and they began looking forward to his morning meetings. Yang would ask about their families, listen to their problems, and offer advice when they asked for it. For the first time in thousands of years, the rigid caste system that kept different species apart began to crack. A Veltari child would play games with a Maclone cub while their parents worked alongside human teachers. Young aliens who had been taught to fear and distrust other species started making friends across racial lines. The Federation had built their power on keeping everyone separate and suspicious of each other. But humans were weaving invisible threads between all the different alien races. They did this without any master plan or secret agenda. They simply treated everyone with kindness and respect because that was who they were. Engineer Kim started teaching alien workers Earth songs during their break times. The engine rooms filled with voices singing in dozens of different languages but somehow harmonizing together. Minorly organized sports games where Veltari Macklin and other species competed together instead of against each other. Dr. Choi trained alien medical students who took human healing techniques. Back to their homeworlds, Captain Park watched all this from his small embassy building on the Federation capital world. His people were not the strongest or smartest species in the galaxy, but they were doing something remarkable. They were bringing peace to places where there had only been fear. They were creating friendship between species that had been enemies for centuries. The Federation High Council started receiving strange reports from across the galaxy. Worker productivity was higher than it had ever been, but the old rules about species staying separate were being ignored. Aliens were mixing together in ways that had never happened before. Some council members wanted to put limits on human activities, but the economic benefits were too good to ignore. Human innovation and cooperation had increased trade profits by 30% in just 5 years more. Ships were coming from Earth carrying teachers, doctors, engineers, and artists. Humanity was ready to take their full place among the stars. But as Commander Park looked out at the great Federation capital with its towering monuments to power and control, he wondered if the galaxy was really ready for what humans would bring. Change was coming, carried in the laughter of human children playing with alien friends, in the songs that made even the coldest factory floor feel warm, and in the simple human belief that everyone deserved kindness, no matter how different they looked. The Corvex elders could feel their perfect order shifting like sand beneath their feet, but they had no idea how to stop it. The threads humans were weaving grew stronger every day, connecting hearts and minds across impossible distances. Soon the galaxy would discover that these threads were not just decorations but the foundation of something entirely new. 2 years after humans arrived in the galaxy, everything changed in ways no one expected. The Zephan Rebellion exploded across the outer rim worlds when 3 mining colonies refused to send their monthly tribute to the Corvex homeworld. But this rebellion was different from anything the Federation had seen before. It was not just one species fighting against their masters. It was Veltari merchants, Macklin soldiers, and dozens of other races standing together as one united force. Grand Elder Mortash stood in the crystal chamber where the Corvex Council made all their important decisions. His body glowed angry red as he spoke to the other elders. This chaos began when the humans arrived, he declared. They spread their poison of equality and friendship. They make others forget their proper place in our perfect system. The ancient alien had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years, and he had never seen anything like this rebellion. The Federation should have crushed the revolt in a few days. They had done it countless times before whenever a single species tried to fight back, but something had changed when the rebel forces attacked Federation ships. They used tactics that no military academy had ever taught. When Federation troops tried to land on rebel worlds, they found defenses that combined technologies from a dozen different species working together. Commander Park found himself caught in the middle of an impossible situation. The Federation demanded that all humans abandon the rebels and return to their assigned duties. Earth government, still new to galactic politics, ordered their people to stay neutral and avoid taking sides. But Park watched human families living alongside alien refugees. He saw human children crying when their alien friends were hurt by Federation bombs, and he knew that staying neutral was impossible. Captain Song Ji-hoon commanded a small transport ship that was officially carrying humanitarian aid to the Outer Rim worlds, but everyone knew the truth. His ship carried medical supplies to rebel planets and sometimes even weapons. The Federation accused him of breaking neutrality laws, but Song just smiled and said he was helping friends in need. Lieutenant Ko Min Seok was barely 25 years old when he found himself leading a mixed species squadron against a Federation dreadnought. His pilots included humans, Veltari Macklin, and 3 other species who had never worked together before. Military experts said it was impossible for such a mixed group to coordinate their attacks, but Ko had learned something from watching humans work in the mines and factories. Different species thinking together were stronger than any single group thinking alone. The battle should have been a massacre. The Federation dreadnought was 10 times larger than Ko's small fighters and had weapons that could destroy entire planets. But Ko's squadron moved like dancers in space. Each species did what they did best while covering for their friends' weaknesses. The Veltari pilots calculated perfect attack angles, while Macklin fighters provided heavy firepower, and human pilots coordinated everything with tactics that confused the enemy. When the Great Federation ship finally exploded, Ko's squadron had not lost a single pilot. Dr. Choi Min Young found herself running the largest field hospital in rebel territory. Federation bombs were falling on civilian targets, and wounded aliens of every species were being brought to her medical tents. She worked for days without sleep performing surgery on Veltari Macklin Corvex and species she had never seen before. Human medical knowledge combined with what she had learned from alien healers created treatments that saved lives. The Federation said were impossible to save, but humans were not just fighters and healers, they were inspirers. When Veltari banker Yexdor saw human civilian Zhang Wujin risk his life to save a group of Macklin children from a bombing, something changed deep in the merchant heart. If these young humans can be so brave, Yexdor told his clan, then we can be brave too. Within days, the entire Veltari banking network was secretly funding the rebellion. The war spread faster than anyone expected. Systems that had been loyal to the Federation for centuries suddenly declared independence. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years were sharing resources and fighting side by side. The crystalline entities who lived as pure energy began using their power to protect rebel planets. The hive minds of the Delta Quadrant shared their collective knowledge to help coordinate attacks across vast distances. The Corvex tried to end the war quickly by threatening to destroy Earth itself. They assembled the largest fleet in galactic history and sent it toward the small blue planet, expecting humans to surrender. Immediately, Grand Elder Moore Tash was certain that once humans saw the power arrayed against their homeworld, they would abandon their alien friends and beg for mercy. Instead, the Corvex discovered that humans had been busy during their years in the galaxy. Every species they had befriended sent ships to defend Earth. The Great Battle of the Sol System saw Macklin warriors fighting alongside human pilots, while Veltari engineers and human mechanics worked together to keep damaged ships flying. Energy beings created shields of pure light, while physical species provided the weapons to break through. Federation Defenses Commander Park stood on his bridge watching as alien ships arrived from across the galaxy to protect his homeworld. A young Macklin commander opened communication channels. Humans taught us that friends protect each other, he said. Your world is our world now. We fight together or we die together. The communication channels filled with similar messages from dozens of species, all saying the same thing. They would not let humanity face this threat alone. The Federation fleet was larger and had better weapons, but they were fighting as separate species groups while the defenders fought as one unified force. Human tactics coordinated different alien strengths into combinations the Federation had never seen. Veltari shields protected Macklin assault ships, while human fighters used Corvex energy weapons in ways their designers never intended. When the last Federation ship retreated from Earth space, Grand Elder Mortash finally understood what had happened. Humans had not conquered the galaxy with superior technology or advanced weapons. They had conquered it with something far more dangerous: hope. They had shown every oppressed species that change was possible, that friendship could cross any divide, and that even the mightiest empire could fall if enough people stood together. The rebellion succeeded not because the rebels were stronger, but because they believed in something the Federation never understood. They believed that different species could work together as equals. They believed That friendship was more powerful than fear, and they believed that a galaxy based on cooperation would be better than one based on control. As Federation forces retreated from system after system, losing battles they should have won easily, Mortash realized the terrible truth: the humans had not just joined galactic civilization, they had transformed it completely. The old ways of thinking about power and control were ending, and something entirely new was beginning. The galaxy would never be the same because humans had shown everyone that it could be better. The Zephan rebellion ended not with a great battle, but with a simple ceremony on the neutral world of Kepler Station. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Hall, where Federation laws had been written for 3,000 years, but today they were writing something completely new: the Charter of the Galactic Free. Alliance Ambassador Lehigh Jin stood at the center of the enormous hall wearing a simple blue dress from Earth. She looked small and plain compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by alien dignitaries around her. But every species in the galaxy trusted her. During the war, she had negotiated ceasefires, arranged prisoner exchanges, and somehow convinced natural enemies to work together. She had been chosen to speak for humanity, not because she was the smartest diplomat, but because she had the biggest heart. We gather today not as conquerors or conquered. She began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall translation systems. We gather as friends who have learned that our differences make us stronger, not weaker. The Veltari delegation clicked their approval in their traditional way, while Maklan warriors thumped their weapons against their shields to show respect. The new alliance was everything the old Federation was not. Instead of one species ruling over all others, every member world had an equal voice in the government. Instead of rigid castes that decided what each species could do, beings were free to choose their own paths. Trade flowed freely between worlds without tariffs or restrictions. Knowledge was shared openly instead of being hoarded by the ruling class. For the first time in galactic history, young aliens could dream of becoming anything they wanted, regardless of which species they were born into. Captain Kim Dong-min watched from the observation deck as alien children played together in the station gardens. A young Veltari was teaching a Maklan cub how to calculate hyperspace jumps, while a group of mixed-species teenagers worked together on an art project that combined elements from 12 different cultures. This was what humans had really brought to the galaxy: the simple idea that being different did not mean being enemies. The transformation was not always easy. Admiral Park, now serving as humanity military liaison to the Alliance, spent most of his time mediating disputes between species that had been fighting for centuries. The Korvax, stripped of their empire but allowed to keep their homeworld, struggled to find their place in a galaxy that no longer feared them. Some former Federation loyalists formed resistance groups trying to restore the old order through sabotage and terrorism, but every challenge only made the Alliance stronger. When the hegemony of outer worlds attacked Alliance border systems, expecting to find the same divided species that had fought each other for thousands of years, they instead faced a completely united defense. Human tactics, coordinated with Maklan strength, Veltari logistics supported by alien courage, and former enemies fought side by side to protect their new friendship. Dr. Choi, now leading the Alliance Medical Corps, established hospitals on every member world staffed by mixed-species teams. Her greatest achievement was not the advanced treatments they developed by combining different medical traditions, but the trust between species that made such cooperation possible. When a Veltari doctor worked alongside a Maklan medic to save a human patient, barriers that had existed for millennia simply disappeared. Economic boom that followed surprised even the most optimistic planners. With species freely sharing their knowledge and resources instead of hoarding them, technology advanced faster than anyone thought possible. Engineer Kim So-min, working with a team of alien scientists, developed new fusion drives that could cross the galaxy in weeks. Instead of months, the old Federation had taken 6 months to travel from one end of their territory to the other. Farmer Yang Tae-young taught alien agriculturalists Earth farming techniques that doubled food production on dozens of worlds. His methods seemed simple: crop rotation, companion planting, and soil enrichment, but when combined with alien knowledge of different planetary environments, the results were amazing. Worlds that had struggled to feed their populations became exporters of food to other systems, but perhaps the most important change was cultural. Human artists like musician Park Jin-woo began blending Earth melodies with alien harmonies, creating new forms of music that spoke to every species. His concerts drew audiences from across the galaxy, beings who had never heard each other music before discovering that rhythm and melody could cross any divide. Alien poets learned human concepts of love and hope, while human philosophers studied ancient alien wisdom about time and space. For the first time, the galaxy had a shared culture that belonged to everyone instead of separate traditions that kept species apart. Young beings grew up learning stories from dozens of different worlds, seeing the universe through eyes that could appreciate any kind of beauty. The old Corvex capital, once a monument to imperial power, was transformed into the Alliance Cultural Center. The great throne room where Grand Elder Moore Tash had once ruled became a library open to all species. The weapons factories were converted into schools where young beings from every world could learn together. Even former Federation loyalists had to admit that their children seemed happier in this new galaxy. Trade routes that had been controlled by Federation monopolies became free highways, where any species could travel and do business. The great markets of Veltari Prime welcomed merchants from every corner of the galaxy, while the engineering workshops of Macklin space stations taught their techniques to anyone willing to learn. Space itself seemed more welcoming when filled with ships from dozens of different worlds, all traveling together in peace. Captain Song Ji-hoon now commanded one of the Alliance exploration fleets that ventured into uncharted regions beyond known space. His crew included beings from 20 different species working together to discover new worlds and make contact with unknown civilizations. When they encountered the mysterious quantum dancers in the void between stars, it was their diversity that made peaceful contact possible. Each species understood different aspects of the strange energy beings. The military transformation was equally remarkable. Instead of conquest and oppression, Alliance forces focused on protection and peacekeeping. Admiral Kim Tae-hoon led humanitarian missions to worlds struck by natural disasters, his fleet carrying aid and hope rather than weapons of war. When conflicts did arise, Alliance mediators, usually mixed teams led by humans, found solutions that honored every group needs without requiring anyone to surrender their dignity. As ambassador, Lee signed the final documents that formally established the Alliance government. She thought about how far they had all come. Humans had arrived in the galaxy as janitors and minor species, so weak that no one took them seriously. Now they were partners in the greatest civilization the stars had ever seen. But the real victory was not human. It belonged to every species that had chosen friendship over fear, cooperation over conquest. The galaxy was free and united and full of hope for a future that would be better than anything they had known before. The Alliance was more than a government. It was a promise that different beings could live together in peace, and that the universe was big enough for everyone to find their place among the stars. 50 years after the Alliance Charter was signed, the galaxy had become something no one could have imagined. The great cities of former Federation worlds now sparkled with new architecture that blended styles from dozens of different species. On New Harmony, the Alliance capital built where 3 star systems met, beings walked together through parks designed by human landscape artists and alien engineers working in perfect cooperation. Professor Kang Min-jun taught galactic history at the University of Integrated Sciences, where his classroom held students from 23 different species. His favorite lesson was showing old Federation propaganda films that portrayed humans as primitive savages, then comparing them to recordings of the Alliance's greatest achievements, the Healer Accord that ended disease on 17 worlds, the cultural renaissance that created entirely new art forms, and the Great Peace Treaty that brought even the most warlike species into lasting friendship. The Alliance had grown far beyond anyone's wildest dreams. New species joined every year, drawn not by conquest or threats, but by the simple promise that they would be welcomed as equals. The crystalline entities of the Omega Sector, beings of pure energy, who had never communicated with physical life forms, learned to interact through human-designed translation matrices, the hive minds of the Delta Quadrant species that shared thoughts across entire planets discovered individual creativity through human concepts of personal expression. Captain Song. Hey, one commanded the Alliance exploration vessel New Dawn, leading the first mixed-species crew to venture beyond the galaxy edge. Her ship carried human diplomats, Veltari scientists, Maclon protectors, and representatives from dozens of other species when they encountered the mysterious void. Walkers in the dark space between galaxies, it was their diversity that saved them. Human curiosity combined with alien logic and shared courage working together to solve problems no single species could have handled alone. But the real measure of the Alliance success was not in its grand achievements. It was in the small moments that happened every day across thousands of worlds. Market vendor park. Say, resold Earth vegetables alongside alien delicacies, her customers a cheerful mix of species who chatted with each other while shopping. Children played games that combined rules from a dozen different cultures while their parents worked in offices where humans Macklin and Veltari shared ideas as naturally as breathing mechanic Lee. Su Young worked in a garage where teenagers from 5 different species learned together, repairing everything from human hovercars to Macklon battle tanks. Their different perspectives and ways of thinking made them all better at their jobs. A problem that stumped a human mind might be easily solved by Veltari mathematics, while Macklon engineering strength could handle tasks that would be impossible for other species. The transformation was visible everywhere. The old Federation had built monuments to power and control, massive statues of Corvex elders, military bases shaped like weapons, and government buildings designed to make visitors feel small and afraid. The Alliance built parks where children played, hospitals that welcomed everyone, and community centers where neighbors from different worlds gathered to share meals and stories. Technology advanced at incredible speeds when minds that thought in completely different ways worked together. Human intuition combined with Veltari mathematical precision and Macklon engineering strength created wonders that amazed even their creators. The Great Ring Network linked every Alliance world with instantaneous communication, allowing a farmer on one planet to share growing tips with agriculturalists on the other side of the galaxy. Medical advances meant that beings who had been enemies for centuries now worked together to extend life and reduce suffering across the known universe. Dr. Park Yoon developed treatments that worked on dozens of different alien biologies by combining human understanding of chemistry with alien knowledge of energy. Healing diseases that had plagued entire species for thousands of years were eliminated in a single generation. Artist Kim Yoo-jin became famous across 40 star systems for her sculptures that could only be appreciated by multiple species viewing them together. Each piece looked different to various types of eyes and minds, but when beings from different worlds stood around her art, they saw something beautiful that none of them could perceive alone. Her work became a symbol of Alliance unity, stronger together than apart. The education system flourished as never before in galactic history. Young beings learned not just the technical skills they needed for their careers, but the cultural understanding that let them work with anyone a human child might spend one semester studying on a Macklin military world, learning discipline and honor, then the next on a Veltari merchant station, mastering mathematics and trade. By the time they reached adulthood, Alliance citizens could fit in anywhere in the galaxy. Even former enemies found new purposes in the transformed civilization. The Corvex, once the galaxy oppressors, became its historians and philosophers. Their long lives and perfect memories made them ideal keepers of the Alliance growing cultural heritage. Some younger Corvex even chose to serve in human-led exploration crews, their ancient wisdom combined with human courage opening new frontiers beyond the known stars. The military had transformed completely. Instead of conquest and oppression, Alliance forces focused on protection and peacekeeping. Admiral Kim Tae-hoon led humanitarian missions to worlds struck by natural disasters, his fleet carrying aid and hope rather than weapons of war. When conflicts did arise, Alliance mediators found solutions that honored every group needs while maintaining the peace that had become the galaxy's greatest treasure. Sports and entertainment created new bonds across species that had never existed before. The Galactic Unity Games brought together athletes from every world, competing in events that showcased each species' strengths while celebrating their participation together. Human runners raced alongside Macklin powerlifters and Veltari precision dancers, while crowds cheered for everyone regardless of which world they came from. The great libraries of the Alliance contained knowledge from every known civilization. Human literature sat next to Korvax philosophy and Macklin warrior codes. Young scholars could study the complete history of galactic civilization, learning how different species had developed their own unique solutions to universal problems. The sharing of knowledge had accelerated progress in every field from agriculture to space exploration. Captain Park Jin-woo, now an old man, looked out over the celebrations marking the 50th anniversary of the Alliance Charter. The plaza below was filled with beings from dozens of worlds dancing to music that blended traditional melodies from every known culture. Children who had never known war or oppression played together while their parents shared food and stories from their home planets. The economic prosperity was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Free trade between species had created wealth that reached every world. Citizens of Alliance planets enjoyed living standards that would have been unimaginable under Federation rule. Everyone had access to education, healthcare, and opportunities to pursue their dreams, regardless of which species they belonged. Two art galleries displayed works created by mixed species teams, combining different cultural traditions into entirely new forms of beauty. Museums preserved the history of every civilization while celebrating how they had all come together to build something greater. Concert halls rang with music that could move beings to tears, regardless of which world they came from. As Dr. Choi, now elderly, but still active in Alliance leadership, walked through the memorial gardens dedicated to those who had died in the rebellion, she marveled at how far they had all come. The galaxy that had once been ruled by fear and division now thrived on friendship and cooperation. Beings who had been taught to hate each other now raised children together, shared dreams, and built a future that belonged to everyone. This was the Golden Age. The galaxy had never known it needed, and humanity had shown them all that it was possible. The stars themselves seemed brighter when seen from worlds where different species lived together in peace. The message from Earth arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, transmitted through the quantum relay network that connected every Alliance world. President Park Moon-young read it 3 times before she fully understood what humanity homeworld was, telling them after 75 years of galactic civilization, after building the greatest alliance the universe had ever known, Earth was calling its children home. The official explanation was simple and reasonable. Earth needed humanity knowledge and experience to solve problems that had grown worse during their absence. Climate changes, resource depletion, and social divisions required solutions that could only come from humans, who had learned to work with dozens of different species. But those who knew Earth leadership understood the real message hidden in diplomatic language. Humanity had been in space too long, had changed too much, and needed to remember how to be purely human again. Admiral Kim Jae-sung, now commanding the Alliance largest fleet, stared at the message with growing disbelief. They want us to abandon everything we have built, he told his mixed species staff. Abandon our friends, our homes, our new families. His chief engineer, a Macklin named Vorth, who had served with humans for 30 years, placed a massive hand on the admiral's shoulder. Humans taught us that sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones, Vorth said quietly, but I do not understand how this can be right. The news spread through Alliance space like ripples across a still pond on New Harmony. Human children who had never seen Earth cried as their alien friends tried to comfort them in the great markets of Veltari Prime. Human merchants closed shops they had run for decades, while their alien partners struggled to understand why their trusted friends were leaving. Macklin warriors who had fought alongside human soldiers for generations stood silent, honor bound not to show their grief but unable to hide the pain in their eyes. Dr. Song Yi-jang, now head of the Alliance Medical Academy, tried to explain the situation to her mixed species staff. Earth believes we have lost our humanity by living so closely with other species, she said, her voice breaking slightly. They fear we have become something they do not recognize. A young Veltari medical student raised his hand. Dr. Song, does this mean the things you taught us about compassion and healing were not truly human? The question hung in the air like an accusation. that no one could answer. Not every human obeyed the recall order. Captain Lee Dai-young, whose crew had become her family over 20 years of deep space exploration, chose to resign from Earth military rather than abandon her alien friend's engineer. Park Hyen-woo, married to a Veltari scientist and father to 3 hybrid children, declared that his family was more important than his planet of birth. Hundreds, then thousands of humans made similar choices, accepting exile from Earth rather than exile from the galaxy they had helped create, but most humans followed their orders even as their hearts broke. Ambassador Lee Hae-jin, now an elderly stateswoman, gave her final speech to the Alliance Council with tears streaming down her face. "We came to your galaxy as strangers seeking opportunity," she said to the assembled representatives. "You welcomed us, learned from us, and taught us more than we ever imagined possible. We leave not because we want to, but because Earth has commanded it. Please remember us not as the friends who abandoned you, but as the ones who loved you enough to give you the tools to continue. Without us, the evacuation took too long and painful years." Human families packed belongings that included gifts from dozens of worlds, Macklin weapons bestowed as honors, Veltari mathematical instruments given in friendship, crystalline artwork from energy beings who had learned to create beauty in physical form, children who had played with alien friends since birth, struggled to understand why they could not stay together, adults who had found their life purpose serving the Alliance tried to imagine futures that no longer included the friends who had made their work meaningful. The alien species watched in growing alarm as their human partners prepared to leave without humans to bridge the gaps between different cultures. Old tensions began to resurface. The Veltari and Macklon, natural competitors who had learned cooperation through human mediation, found themselves arguing over trade routes and military protocols. Smaller species that had gained influence through human advocacy worried about being overlooked by their more powerful neighbor scientists. Kim Soo-bin and her research team, who had spent decades developing new technologies through interspecies collaboration, tried desperately to complete their work before the evacuation deadline. Their latest project, a unified translation system that could let any species communicate with any other, was 90% complete, but without human insight into language and culture, the remaining work seemed impossible. The breakthrough that could have united the galaxy forever would remain unfinished. Engineer Park So-young worked frantically to train alien mechanics in maintaining the Great Ring network that connected every Alliance world. The system was incredibly complex, requiring constant adjustments that balanced dozens of different technologies without human engineers who understood how all the pieces fit together. The network would eventually fail, leaving worlds isolated and alone. As the great evacuation ships prepared to depart, alien dignitaries gathered at spaceports across the galaxy to bid farewell to their human friends. The ceremonies were heartbreaking. Beings who had worked together for decades, who had shared dangers and celebrations, who had become true family, saying goodbye, perhaps forever. Macklin warriors performed honor salutes for human comrades. Veltari merchants offered precious gifts to departing human partners, and energy beings created light displays that painted the stars with messages of love and loss. Captain Lee Min-ho, commanding one of the evacuation vessels, tried to explain to his alien crew why humans had to leave Earth. Says, "We have forgotten who we are," he told them. "But when I look at you, when I see how we have all grown together, I think maybe we have remembered who we could become." His words brought tears to eyes that had never learned to cry, and silence to voices that had always found something to say. The last ship left Alliance space on a Wednesday at sunset Earth time. Captain Park Ji-won, commanding the final evacuation vessel, looked back at the galaxy. They were leaving behind. Every human on every ship felt the same terrible weight. They were abandoning not just worlds and friends, but a version of humanity that had learned to be something greater than any single species could achieve alone. Dr. Choi, now in her 90s and barely able to walk, sat in her cabin watching the stars grow distant through her small window. She had delivered thousands of alien babies, had saved countless lives, had taught healing to beings whose biology she had never seen before. Now she was leaving them all behind, returning to a world that no longer felt like home. Earth wanted pure humans, but she was no longer sure what that meant. Behind them, the Alliance struggled to understand what had happened. For 75 years they had never faced the future without the strange, wonderful beings who had taught them that differences were strengths and that friendship could overcome any obstacle, the galaxy felt emptier, darker, and infinitely more lonely, as the last human ships disappeared into the void between stars young. Aliens who had grown up expecting to work and play with friends from dozens of worlds now learned that such cooperation might be impossible without human guidance. The Golden Age was ending, and no one knew what would come next. The stars themselves seemed dimmer, as if some essential light had gone out of the universe when humanity walked away from the civilization they had helped create. The galaxy watched the departing ships until they vanished into hyperspace, then turned to face an uncertain future without the friends who had made everything possible. 10 years after humanity's departure, the Galactic Free Alliance was dying. What had taken decades to build was crumbling in just a few short years, like a beautiful garden left untended. The great assembly hall on New Harmony, once filled with the voices of representatives from 47 species working together, now echoed with arguments and accusations that grew louder every day. Elder Vorth, the Macklon who had served as Admiral Kim chief engineer, now led his species delegation. His voice was heavy with sorrow as he addressed the emergency council session. Without humans to show us the path forward, we have forgotten how to walk together, he said. The Veltari hoard resources while outer worlds starve. The crystalline entities retreat to their energy realm, saying physical species cannot understand their needs. Even my own people speak of returning to the warrior codes of our ancestors. The problems had started small. Trade disputes that humans would have resolved in hours dragged on for months. Scientific projects that had thrived on mixed species cooperation stalled as different groups could not agree on basic approaches. The Great Ring Network, humanity gift of instant communication across the galaxy, began failing as species stopped sharing the technical knowledge needed to maintain the complex systems. Dr. Yex Torai, the Veltari scientist who had learned medicine from Dr. Song, tried desperately to keep the Alliance medical corps functioning, but without human doctors to bridge the gaps between different species. Healing practices, treatments that had saved millions of lives were being forgotten. Humans saw connections where we saw only differences. She reported to the council they understood that Macklon's strength could support Veltari precision, that energy, being wisdom, could guide physical species healing. Without that understanding, we are becoming strangers again. The economic collapse followed quickly. The free trade system that had made every alliance world prosperous depended on trust between species that had been enemies for thousands of years. Humans had built that trust through countless small acts of friendship and fairness. Without human mediators, old suspicions returned like poison seeping through cracks in a foundation. Veltari merchants refused to trade with Macklon industrialists, claiming they could not trust warrior species with complex financial agreements. Energy beings stopped sharing their power generation secrets, saying that physical species were too primitive to use such knowledge safely. Within 5 years, worlds that had known abundance and prosperity were facing shortages of basic necessities like food and medicine. Captain Lexmore, the former Veltari banker who had learned generosity from human example, now led a desperate mission to the edge of Alliance space. His ship carried the last functioning quantum communicator, hoping to reach the human colonies that some evacuation ships had established beyond the galaxy rim. If we cannot bring humans back, he told his mixed crew, perhaps we can learn again how to think as they taught us to think. But the darkness was spreading faster than they could travel. The outer rim worlds, always the most fragile parts of the Alliance, began declaring independence or forming their own small coalitions for protection. The hegemony of outer worlds, humanity, old enemy, saw opportunity in the growing chaos and began reclaiming territory they had lost decades before. Pirates and raiders kept in check for generations by Alliance. Unity grew bold as member species turned inward to protect only their own interests. The worst part was not the economic collapse or political fragmentation, it was the loss of hope. Children who had grown up expecting to work and play with friends from dozens of worlds now learned that their parents' generation considered such cooperation impossible. Young beings who had dreamed of exploring the stars together instead prepared for a future of isolation and endless conflict. On the former Federation capital world, Grand Elder Mortash emerged from retirement to address his people. The ancient Korvax had spent 20 years learning humility and wisdom from human teachers, but now he spoke with something like his old authority. Humans showed us that the galaxy could be better than we ever imagined. He said to the crystalline spires that had once been monuments to Korvax supremacy, we thought their gifts were technology. And trade, we were wrong. Their gift was showing us how to see each other as friends instead of threats. Without that gift, we are returning to the darkness we lived in before they came the Alliance. Military, once a force for peace and protection, began splitting along species lines. Admiral Vextar mixed fleets where Macklin warriors had served alongside Veltari navigators and human tacticians, divided into separate species commands, without humans to coordinate between different military traditions. The unified force that had protected the galaxy became dozens of competing armed groups that sometimes fought each other. Professor Kang University of Integrated Sciences closed its doors as species withdrew their students to their homeworlds. The great library, where beings from every corner of the galaxy had shared knowledge, became empty halls where dust gathered on books written in languages no one remembered how to read. The cultural renaissance that had created new art forms by blending different traditions withered as each species turned inward to preserve only their own heritage. Young Captain Song Hae-won returned from her exploration mission beyond the galaxy edge to find the Alliance she had served collapsing around her. The Void Walkers had taught her crew amazing things about the nature of space and time, but when she tried to share this knowledge at Alliance headquarters, she found that mixed species research teams no longer existed. Each species was keeping its discoveries secret, fearing that sharing knowledge would somehow make them weaker. The final blow came when the Great Ring Network failed completely. The quantum relays that had let any being speak to any other across impossible distances went silent, one by one, without human engineers to maintain the delicate balance between different technologies. The system that had connected every Alliance world collapsed like dominoes falling. Each relay failure caused others to fail until the entire network went dark. For the first time in decades, species found themselves truly alone, unable to call for help or offer aid to distant friends. Worlds that had been linked by instant communication for 50 years suddenly had no way to contact their neighbors, except by sending ships on journeys that took weeks or months. Messages that had once traveled across the galaxy in seconds now took years to reach their destinations. If they arrived at Aelin, the growing darkness, some began to understand what humanity had really meant to the galaxy. They had not been conquerors or rulers. They had not imposed their will through superior weapons or advanced technology. They had been the thread that wove all the different species together, the translators who helped enemies become friends, the bridge builders who showed everyone that cooperation was stronger than competition. Engineer Kim So-min would have known how to fix the ring network. Dr. Choi could have mediated the medical disputes that were killing patients. Ambassador Lee would have found compromises that honored every species' needs. But they were gone back to their small blue planet, leaving behind only memories of what the galaxy had been when they were there to hold it together. The Alliance crumbled and worlds turned away from each other in fear and suspicion. The galaxy learned a terrible truth. Humans had not just participated in galactic civilization, they had been its heart and soul. Without them, the greatest alliance in history was becoming just another collection of suspicious species preparing for the wars they had once left behind. The Korvax began rebuilding their old empire, claiming they needed to restore order to the chaos. The Macklin formed warrior clans that fought each other for territory and honor. The Veltari created banking cartels that controlled trade through force rather than cooperation. Even species that had been peaceful for generations started building weapons and training soldiers for conflicts that seemed inevitable. Trade routes that had been free highways became dangerous paths where pirates and warships waited to attack travelers. Art galleries stood empty as each species withdrew into their own cultural tradition. Schools that had taught universal knowledge became training centers for species-specific skills. The unity that had made the galaxy strong was replaced by division that made everyone weak. Captain Vexmore never found the human colonies beyond the galaxy. His ship was destroyed by raiders who cared nothing for the Alliance ideals of peace and cooperation. His last transmission spoke of his regret that they had lost the friends who had taught them how to be better than they were as the stars grew dim with the light of burning worlds and the silence of broken communication networks, the galaxy faced a future darker than anything they had known. The Golden Age was over, and the time of friendship and hope seemed like a distant dream that might never come again without humans to show them the way forward. The galaxy collapsed into the same old patterns of fear, hatred, and war that had ruled the stars before humanity arrived. The greatest civilization in history died not from conquest or disaster, but from the simple absence of the beings who had made it possible. Stars went dark because the light that had connected them all was gone.